I'm sorry. Good evening and welcome to the Lopatcong Township Planning Board meeting for June 2016. At this time, I'd like to invite you to join us in the silent moment of prayer, followed immediately by the oath of allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'm required to state that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided indicating the time and place of the meeting in accordance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975 by advertising a notice in the Star Gazette and the Express Times and by posting a copy on the bulletin board in the municipal building. Beth, may I have a roll call, please?
Member Slotts?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Chesky? Fryer?
Here.
Wolf?
Here.
Chairman McKay?
Here.
Vice Chairman Burrell?
Here.
Chairman Van Vliet?
Here.
Alternate Fishback? Alternate Brown?
Okay, we'll move on to business. Our first order of business this evening is the I-78 Logistics Park Resolution. I'll take you over.
If I can just jump in here for 1 second. I had drafted the resolution soon after the last board meeting on June 2nd. I had the benefit of input from our other board professionals. I also sent the resolution for review to the applicant's attorney, Paul Ken. He got back to me literally 6:01 this morning with an email making some proposed changes. I was able to review it, review his memo. I incorporated some, but by no means all the changes he proposed. There's one additional change that I would like to make to the resolution, is on page 15, paragraph 10. In lieu of what I have there, I just want to confirm that. So the one we're talking about, that it would now read, the applicant shall pay any outstanding invoices for fees and costs incurred in connection with this application as provided in the escrow agreement with the township. I suggest that change be made. I think it's a reasonable request. We've had discussions with the applicant's attorney regarding the payment of services rendered by the professionals for this board, and has been assured that they will be paid. The ordinance seems to have a little bit of a hole in it, maybe a big hole in it, where it doesn't provide for the payment of professional fees by the applicant when the GBP application has been submitted. So we need to make this modification, but with the applicant's representation that the fees will be paid. We're really bound by the escrow agreement with the town.
Johnny, could you repeat?
I was just going to say
one more time.
Is it number 9 you're talking about?
No, number 10. This approval shall be null and void unless the applicant obtains a statement.
The Chief Financial Officer.
It's 9, I think.
It's 10. 10 would be deleted. Condition 10 would be deleted, and in its place, it would read, the applicant shall pay all outstanding invoices for fees and costs incurred in connection with this application as provided in the escrow agreement with the town.
Well, you're modifying 9 and you're deleting 10.
Do you have a different version of what we have printed by that email?
I think so. No, 10 would be deleted, and in its place, it's very similar to paragraph 9, but
it reads, this approval shall be null and void unless the applicant receives a statement from the CFO of the township within 60 days of the applicant has paid all outstanding fees and costs. So that's what you're taking out.
correct,
And you're putting what you just said.
yes. And it's different from 9 because it's payment in conformity with the escrow agreement with the township.
So instead of within 30 days, so really you're modifying that.
So you're either paying in 30 days or you're going to follow the escrow agreement. Unless the escrow agreement says 30 days.
I think what we should do with 9 at the end, just tie it to 10, we should say, mention this application in accordance with the escrow agreement. That's what we should do. So 9 and 10 will mention the escrow agreement, which is what the applicant's attorney will press this on.
But then 9 and 10 would be a duplicate of each other.
What we can do is simply delete
You delete 9
10.
altogether too.
We can delete 10 and for 9, instead of saying within 30 days, we can simply say as provided in the escrow agreement with the township. I think that covers it.
What we could do, take out 9 and 10 as currently written, and then the new 9 would be what Tony just read off. The applicant shall pay any outstanding invoices for fees and costs incurred in the application provided in the escrow agreement. That's what the applicant's attorney really wanted.
Okay,
And just want to remember the conditions, there's 3 conditions after that. So 11 will become 10, 12, 11, so on and so forth.
that's it. That's the only change.
So then you'll make that change and then resend it to me and I'll send it to the board.
Okay, with that change, any other questions? Comments?
All the stipulations that we had talked about are in there? That what we wanted them to agree to? Okay.
I believe so. Paul, did you have any further changes you wanted to go over?
And that's in job solutions, typical resolution. We gave George and I the opportunity to look at it after we come up with the draft and provide commentary on the draft.
Okay,
And we did incorporate all our comments. So I'm satisfied.
so you're satisfied? George, you also?
Yes, I didn't see the revised one, so you told me, but I assume put in my comment. Yes, I did. And then I have no further question. The lion's share what Mr. Ken came up with, we were agreeing with, and Tony's office incorporated that into the resolution.
Any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution with the changes so outlined.
Motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Beth, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, members Fox,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Wachowski.
Yes.
Pryor.
Yes.
Wolf.
Yes.
Mayor McKay.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Brown.
Yes.
Chairman Henson.
Yes. After that, moving on to the next order of business, we have the ROM zone history report. Discussion on that. George, I think that's your.
Yes, what we did is put together an outline of possible, for the board's consideration, possible zoning amendments for the consideration of the board in the ROM zone industrial district. What we tried to do in this report was go through and identify an approach that the town may wish to take in defining what uses are permitted in the ROM district. Because one of the questions the board had is, well, what are the permitted uses? How can we structure it so that we know what we're getting rather than the more permissive requirements that the zone, that the ordinance currently contains? As most of you are aware, our industrial district basically says, well, I'll actually read it. We don't have to say basically. The generally under permitted uses says permitted principal uses as industry, which involves only processing, assembly, packaging, or storage of previously refined materials, such as but not limited to the following industries. And the question that has come up is that's a very permissive type of ordinance, and that leaves it open to pretty broad conclusions about what might or might not be permitted at uses. What we're suggesting is if the board would like to get a tighter handle on that, is that we think about going to a more traditional approach that most town use today, and that is that if a use is not specifically listed, it is prohibited. And then to further define that, what we are suggesting is the town might consider wanting to identify the various permitted uses by the federal industrial code, which provides a very detailed description of each industry. And what we did in this ordinance is list all the various industrial codes that we think might apply. We're not saying that this is the list that you should necessarily approve, but it's a list of uses that might be worth discussing whether or not you think they should be permitted in the district. But what this would do is make it very clear that if an application came in before us, his industrial code that he would be assigned to his business could then be matched against the ordinance, and he would either be a permitted use or not permitted. And if he wasn't on the list, then he would have to seek clarity and a use variance with the town in order to construct it within the industrial district. So we thought going to that type of approach would actually give us a way to not only define specifically what uses, but also give us a very firm definition of what each use is comprised, because the industrial codes, and I didn't attach it to the back of what you have, but just for the ones we have in there, the industrial codes each have 2 or 3 pages of descriptions of what constitutes that use. So it's a very definitive way to look at uses, and there are a few towns in New Jersey that actually use this system. Wall Township is the one I'm the most familiar with. So one of the things we're thinking is to have the board look at this, think about it, see if this tightening of an approach to permitted uses is one that you think is appropriate. And if you do, then we ought to go through these lists and see if, what uses you actually think are compatible with or not compatible with the township's industrial district. The other aspect that we looked at was changing the ordinance to be compatible with the Highlands legislation that deals with our center designation. In other words, we're expected at some point to develop an ordinance bringing our township regulations into conformance with the Highlands regulations within our center. And also we're supposed to be adopting a land use recommendations and actually land use regulations for the township also consistent with the Highlands. One of the things that came out of that is that the Highlands has identified a list of major polluters that they consider to be uses that should be reviewed and given special consideration if they fall within a karst topography, Tier 1 wellhead area, and within a groundwater recharge area. They consider that these certain uses should be given a very close review. And so what this ordinance does is recommend that those uses that have been identified as a major polluting source within the Highlands area would actually have to then go under the review to determine if they could be constructed within one of these areas. And what that is they have established what they call best management practices. That it wouldn't be that the industry would necessarily be prohibited, it would just have to be designed and conform to a list of best management practices in order to be built on top of a karst topography or a groundwater recharge area. The one thing that the ordinance would do is that certain types of polluters would not be allowed within Tier 1 wellhead areas. It would actually prohibit those uses. And if one of those would come in, they would essentially be considered a prohibited use, and obviously subject to review. The other thing that we did in this ordinance would be, well, not in this ordinance, but in our recommendations would be to repeal the resource recovery section. If you're familiar with it, we do allow resource recycling and recovery industries to be located in our industrial district. The board had concerns about that, so this would repeal that section of the ordinance and basically eliminate them for consideration as a permitted use. The ordinance also, the recommendations also in here essentially redefines the asphalt manufacturing and concrete manufacturing plant to be specific to the uses that we already have. In other words, the definition has been refined so that the existing concrete manufacturer could continue to operate and be a permitted use. We would not be in conflict with the ordinance. We've also tightened the definition on an asphalt plant to make sure that that they are not actually making asphalt, they're making products from asphalt. And we can go through the definition if you like. Also in this little package, we went through and tried to identify what businesses might be impacted, existing businesses, if the ordinances were changed and modified. And that's located on, which is probably of interest to the board. That's on page 8. We went through and listed the 5 businesses that exist within the area and the potential impact on them if these regulations are put into place. And I can go through them in detail. There's a ready-mix concrete supplier within the district, SCC Enterprises. They are located within a Tier 1 wellhead area. And if this ordinance were adopted, they would become non-conforming. And obviously, if they chose to expand or do anything, they'd actually have to come in for a use variance. The Performance Metal and Performance Materials Chemical Manufacturer, that's your large, one of your large companies, is also located within your Tier 1 wellhead protection area. So essentially there, they would be a pre-existing non-conforming use, and obviously in a Tier 1 wellhead area, if they chose to expand, they would have to come in and be considered as a use variance within that district. Brake and Spindle, that's an automobile repair shop. We believe that they are considered, that they currently are fine, that they would have to, if they ever came in, would have to meet best management practices because they are considered a potential pollutant. Precast concrete, the company that's out there today, is a permitted use and would remain a permitted use. But if for some reason they would expand, they are on a karst topography area, they would have to meet best management practices if they came in. And the currently approved asphalt plant that isn't built is essentially the same. They would be a permitted use, a permitted conditional use, and if they were to come in and modify their plans or want to change or expand, they would have to meet best management practices as outlined. So really, those are it doesn't affect many of the properties, but those are the 5 that we thought had direct impact. On the back side of the ordinance is the chart that's very difficult to read unless you have glasses on. We went through and identified each piece of property in the industrial district, the current use of that property, and whether or not this ordinance would cause them to require relief if they were to expand or build. So there's a summary of every property that's in the district as well. I think it's one of these things that probably should take some time to think about it. Yeah, obviously, you didn't have much time to look at it, and we should probably discuss it in more detail at a later meeting, is my suggestion. Or I'll try to answer any questions now. But I would also like to point out that in terms of where we go from here, if the board were to decide to go ahead with these amendments, a question that we should ask ourselves is when, because we are required under the Highlands regulations to go through and adopt a new set of regulations for our town center, We're also required to adopt a new set of land use regulations to bring our town's ordinances into conformance with the regional master plan. That's a process that's ongoing and will be covered with grant money from the Highlands. If we do this separate from that, then it's going to be on us. So it's a question of timing and when we do it and how we do it to go ahead with this. So it's just something to think about in terms of timing and expense, because as I say, we do have to do the Highlands conformance materials, which is covered by grant money, and it's a larger process. It would look at more than the ROM district.
Do we know that schedule?
What?
Do we know that schedule?
We're working on part of it now. We're working on some of the requirements for the center designation right now. In terms of that, it will probably extend out over several months before we'll be ready to submit.
I mean, like, is it due this year, next year, 5 years?
There's no set, to be honest with you, there's absolutely no set date.
Have we requested the grant money to start the research yet?
The grant money's in place.
So we have the grant money.
No, the town doesn't, the Highlands does.
Oh, okay.
But the answer is that the grant money, it's been funded. And the way the Highlands grant money has been set up is you basically do all the work, complete the thing, the town approves it, and then it's sent to the Highlands for payment. So
we can start
It's a
now.
reimbursement program.
what?
So we can start now.
Yes, we can start. We can start, and we have started. It's just not, it's not very far along.
But you said we couldn't start this yet because we don't want to do it before we get the grant money.
Oh, I'm just saying we shouldn't do it as two separate elements.
Oh, no, absolutely, right.
That's all I'm saying. They should be combined, I think, just to make more sense financially for everybody, because the town will pick up, I'm sorry, the Highlands will pick up the largest percentage of the fees to actually do it. But anyhow, I think it's worth looking at. It's a fair amount to digest, and I'll try to answer any questions you have tonight, and we'll go from there. I also can leave with Beth, if any of you would like to do it, to look at what these different industrial codes, the descriptions of each of the uses, are combined here in about a set of documents that you can look at to just see how detailed the descriptions of these industries actually are.
George, I sent the email this afternoon. I don't know if you saw it. It was kind of late in the afternoon about using the SIC codes.
No, I didn't see that.
They're obsolete. The government's, since 1997, the government's now using an NAI, North American Industrial Classification System, which supersedes and takes over from the SIC system.
Well, that's interesting, because we just downloaded this stuff. Well, we can adjust it. I mean, I'm not worried about that.
I'm just putting it out there. It's up to
I
the
didn't
board
realize that.
what to consider, but it is an obsolete system.
Okay. Well, then we will take a look at the numbers.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're not right, but on the Jeopardy system and pre-treatment, all of that is configured around the SIC code. So unless there's some sort of correspondence between them, there's a lot of ordinances that are out of date.
Oh, I'm not sure of that. I'm sure they are.
Because
I'm
that's
just saying that these descriptions are, but we can always match it into the most current code. I thought we had.
They haven't updated those in 20 years, and the NAICS system is updated, I believe, every 5 years.
Okay. We will look into that if we think this is the way you want to go.
Well, I guess this is as good a point as any place to jump in. I really didn't think it was the way to go to list it all out until in your summary you were saying you had suggested that we go through these and see which we may want to eliminate from being included into Lopatcong.
Correct.
Because I'm like, well, this just lists everything. I don't think this then was township specific by just listing everything. But I like the idea of going through and seeing if there's any in here that we feel are inappropriate.
Well, that was our idea, is that you could go through it and we could make decisions as to what we thought fit, didn't fit, that kind of thing, and then we narrow the list down. I didn't feel comfortable just picking the 5 or 6 or 7 that I thought were what you were thinking about.
And then, of course, can we go through and eliminate and tear down what we want in our town?
You can, absolutely. The problem you face with this is once you put it down, you have a very difficult time of modifying it. I mean, there might be industries here that come out of other industries that you may want to have. I mean, we're not into amusement things, which was suggested at one time for Speckers Road area. I've always felt that once you absolutely define something, it's very difficult to change it. And, you know, do any of us here have the complete foresight to see exactly how you want to work those properties? And, you know, we have to take a look at some of the existing industries in town, like the concrete producer that's down, I guess he's off of River Road down there in the ROM zone down by the old Baker Chemical. Been there for a long time. I mean, are we looking to limit his operation, or sometimes there are consequences that you don't foresee when you get into this kind of detail of limiting land use?
Yeah.
So,
Another possible idea, instead of going through that, that might also limit or control what comes into the township in that area is possibly being more strict than the Highlands, and indicating that the major potential contaminant sources are restricted from Tier 1 and Tier 2 wellhead protection areas. That would eliminate them from getting in without going through conditional use.
I'm sure you could do it. Whether it stands the test of a challenge, I don't know.
Yeah.
Barry, can I say a couple things
Sure.
here on this and some other things? I think in some respects we put the cart before the horse here. I really think you have to go back and revisit the Highland stuff and the master plan, and the zoning is supposed to fall out of that. Second, we were going to talk a little bit about the history and advisability. And the history is important because if you go back into the court case, we spent quite a bit of time in the court explaining why we had permissive zoning. And now you want to undo that. And I don't have a problem with prohibiting the most obnoxious uses that you feel don't belong here. But once you make a list, you may have a very good applicant that comes with a good project. Getting a use variance is not an easy thing. Very strict criteria to meet. You have to go through that. We supported a permissive zoning ordinance. We explained to the courts why. Now we're going to have to undo that. We're going to have to explain why. John, I know you're an environmentalist, and I respect environmentalists. I respect the environment. But I'm going to touch on something Gary said. In the end, you have to defend your criteria. And one of the things I note in the Highlands model land use ordinance, they don't forbid things in Tier 1 protection area. They prohibit them from locating within 200 feet of the wellhead, which is different. That's a less stringent criteria than prohibiting in the Tier 1 area.
I was going on the verbiage that we have.
Yeah, I know. And the Highlands actually didn't invent the wellhead protection. DEP invented that more than a decade ago. They had their own regs, and they're even less stringent. I think it's only 50 feet of the wellhead, and that burden is on the purveyor. They have to actually acquire that property. And then there really are no restrictions on 2 or 3. So, I mean, you got DEP who's here, you got the Highlands who are here, and then we would be beyond all that. We better have some darn good support if we're going to go in that direction. Some of the other things here, I just noticed, you go back to the court suit, and there was a lot of testimony, and the court decided that, the asphalt plant and the concrete plant were the same thing. We have some language in the report that says, we want to leave the concrete plant alone and just attack the asphalt plant. I don't know, there was no vote on that. I think you have to go back, look at the precedent set in the court case again. The Highlands treats them similarly. Again, you have to have justification for everything you do. And I'm not saying it can't be done. I think if you look back at the master plan, yeah, we have a reason to revisit it. Now we've got, a big warehouse project coming. Captive Plastics just underwent a huge expansion. One of the reasons for the plan as it was is we wanted to achieve this balance of residential and non-residential, and we're getting there. We got a bigger project on Ingersoll Rand than we ever had before. And maybe that's the approach that you take to revisit some of the ROM district. Either turn it into a more benign use or just change the zoning altogether. But I think when you start picking on one thing and trying to get overly specific, the harder it is to defend yourself. So my suggestion is very simple. Let's get started with the Highlands work. Let's do this in the right sequence, with the right planning, with the right justification, and the right timing. Each one of these steps has hearings and so on. It's not something you do overnight. And in the end, you'll probably get what you want. If you attack it piecemeal like this, you're not going to get agreement on the board, you're not going to get agreement at council, and you're probably not going to get something that's defensible.
Oh, and I agree. I don't want to attack this piecemeal, but I think the certain areas should require more scrutiny when we are doing the overall conformance to the master plan. And so we're voicing the areas that we want particular attention spent on.
I don't have a problem with that.
Good. And you're right. I mean,
Do it in the right sequence.
Right.
And that's the way it's done. I mean, there's some things that won't warrant significant review and change, but there are others that are going to get your attention. And this is going to be one of them. And that's what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
So, quick question. So regardless on how we move forward, I saw a little bit in the report and your summary that you just gave that this could potentially affect existing businesses, but it can't because they're grandfathered in. The only time it would affect them is if they wanted to expand or get bigger, correct?
Correct, that's correct.
But from where they are now, they're grandfathered in and it couldn't affect them.
That's right. If they wanted to expand, they would fall under whatever the new regulations would be, including, if we included best management practices. And if we included a prohibition about being in a tier 1, obviously if they fell within that, they would have to get a use variance because they wouldn't be a permitted use of that district to expand. They could stay, but they couldn't expand.
The list for the PCS, do we have that anywhere? Can we see what's on the PCS from what Highlands considers potential contamination?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I didn't look at it. I can send you how they define. I'll do that. I'll get it up for the board.
I think that list would be good to see because we might want to just prohibit anything that's a PCS. But I can't say that without looking at the list. I'd like to see the list.
Yeah, the main thing is the Highlands doesn't prohibit these polluters. They list them. But what they really say is that unless you're in a tier 1 wellhead area, what you must do is meet the best management practices. They don't outright prohibit them except in a tier 1 wellhead.
And then as Joe was saying, once you get into the actual ordinance, it's really not the whole area. It's just that within 50 feet or so.
Well, 200 feet in
200
in their ordinance.
So yeah, so if there's a way that we could be more strict to the more detrimental industries, or
We have to rewrite anyway because we're redoing because of the Highlands Act.
Right.
So we're doing that anyway. So to become more strict and take the Highlands Act maybe to the, honestly, the next level or a stricter level or more prohibitive or tighter, this is the time to do it when we're doing the Highlands, like you said, so we can lump it all into the B and get the funding for it versus our own.
And there may be more things that you want to do. This may encompass more than just the industrial. It may encompass other regulations that the township has. It'll be a package all done at once. It'll be revisions to the master plan and to the zoning ordinance all done at once. So it's a much more efficient way, and it's also a more comprehensive way to do it. We're looking at a much broader area of the township than just the issue of what industrial uses you feel comfortable with within your industrial district.
One of the situations that, as a scenario, as far as the township trying to increase the prohibitions based on, say, we just want to put it in tier 3, or tier 1, and look at tier 1, tier 2 areas. In a lot of instances, we're not allowed, especially when it comes to air quality, to impose our own regulations over top of what the state regulations are now. To do that, the amount of resources the town would have to expend to do all the research to come up with trying to implement that would probably be prohibitive to the township. I mean, we're relying on the DEP to enforce or promulgate the air quality regulations in the state. If we come in as a township and try to override theirs with a stricter interpretation, what do we base it on? I mean, we would have to go out and actually do the research that they've probably already done. In the asphalt plant, we had experts in from the DEP on air quality, and we were not allowed to override. We had no basis to override. I'm saying not allowed, but we had no basis to come in. We didn't have the research. We didn't have the case studies to override what they've already done. So, I mean, there's another case where we did it and someone comes back and wants to challenge it. I mean, we have really no defense to take care of it. I'm not trying to minimize it, but as we're going down the road, there's some areas that as a planning board, we just are not allowed to get into.
Good, when we get to them, we'll know, we'll know what to be careful for.
There's avenues that we could go to increase the number of monitoring stations, increase the availability of information to the public, establish hotlines. That's stuff that, you know, you try to negotiate through as we're here. They, even if they provide the minimum amount of monitoring, we might be able to allow to cajole them into increasing that monitoring or the frequency of the monitoring. But to say that we're going to monitor to a position above what has already been established.
If there's a way that we can get these industries into conditional use applications that are stricter and harder to get approved, then that's better. More scrutiny, more review, more studies, and you know, as opposed to just permitted uses.
Can I do
Are we the ones going to do that?
Through zoning, isn't that what we do?
No, not as far as setting the standards of what it is.
I think you can, I think there's a lot of circumstances where you can actually exceed what the state says. If the state says you have to have a minimum 24-foot road, you can change it to say, no, our town wants a minimum of 26-foot. You can go.
That's what the residential site improvement standards are for.
Right, but you can always.
And that's why you adopted, because
Yeah,
the town.
that the towns were doing that. So that's, you know, that's
So now
more
we
like
have-
Gary's example. So
Can I just ask, and just for my own benefit, why are they harder to get? Why is a conditional use? What makes it harder to get than?
A conditional use is not hard to get in.
Now, what Joe said, the
no, a use variance.
Yes,
No, different. A use variance means in zone for this, I want to do that. that is covered in detail in municipal land use law, not an easy variance to get. Conditional use is something different. It means it's not a permitted use, but if you meet these conditions, then
Right, so that was my
then you
error.
conform.
I said
And I know what you're
conditional
saying, and I think that's an avenue.
Right.
If it's done
If it's done right.
correctly, right?
Sure.
So,
I don't want to get in trouble any
Yeah.
more than you guys want to get in trouble. But, you know.
Gary, I have a question. I don't know if it's for you or Tony.
Probably Tony.
Probably.
We're proposing code changes and stuff like that. It has to go up in front of council.
Yes.
For their approval. Has anybody run it by council, whether or not we should spend the time and money to even research all this and send something up to them where they aren't going to be in agreement?
I don't think anyone's researched it, but I think George's suggestion is an excellent one. We can bypass the issue of where the funding comes from if we do it part of the reexamination of the master plan as we conform with Highlands.
Right, and we did mention that a couple months ago, that the reevaluation of the master plan is this board's responsibility, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So, and that's how we tagged it along, and we're able to, okay, so we already established that, is it every 10 years the master plan is reevaluated?
Yes.
So we're past due, we're eligible for funding, we need to look at the master plan, our ordinances, how they compare, plan out this town's development for the next 10 years, and get the funding for it.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned when we talk about recycling, whether it be the concrete plant or the asphalt plant. Buried plastic is a good example. I don't know if buried plastic uses all virgin materials or they recycle their existing material. You start talking about what can be recycled, what can't be recycled. Another maker at the Vontour,
You get into
unpurified chemicals, they're recycling them.
so what?
Just to pick out recycling and say, as a blanket issue, you're not going to allow recycling.
Oh, just to clarify that, we have a section in the code that talks about not how a company would recycle. This is like a recycling facility where you would come in and have aluminum can, you'd separate products, you'd have
Trucks
materials
coming
actually stored on the
off-site.
site.
We're using recycled ingredients. I don't think it
doesn't
would
deal
fall
with the
under that.
manufacturing process or how they would recycle. It's whether or not you'd want to allow one of those types of facilities. And under our current ordinance, as a conditional use, we allow it. The general sense that I got, and we don't have anybody doing that nobody thinks that's a good idea anymore, and we should consider taking it out. And I don't have a problem with that. I can understand the concern, but it doesn't deal with the recycling of an individual industry, how they handle their product.
If we would follow your outlines and suggestions and whatever you came up with, what do you see as possible downsides to this? Are there any, if we would follow what you outlined, are there any downsides? Is there anything which you could foresee as?
No, I think, well, we have to go through the process of amending the master. We still have to follow the procedural questions.
Sure.
We have to get those out of the way. The downside would be more or less the impact on the industries that are here.
I understand that for some of the industries, like for instance, the concrete guy, he's maxed out to begin with, right? He cannot expand anymore. That is what I heard one of the.
I don't think he could squeeze others.
So, and many of these guys are at their max to begin
Unless
with.
he wanted to buy additional
Unless he
property.
wanted to buy something adjacent.
So, and then he would come here and apply
But
for,
then he wouldn't be allowed to expand if he was grandfathered in.
but he can come before what board and then apply for
Use variance.
use variance, right?
He wouldn't come here.
Okay,
So since we're talking about it, so it doesn't go out long, the existing concrete casting industry that's up there today, that casts pipe and stormwater, basins and that sort of thing. Under this ordinance, it would remain a permitted use. It wouldn't change that classification. The only thing that would change is that under the proposed modifications to come in the conformance with the Highlands regulations is that if they would expand, they would have to meet best management practices.
But that's good.
They'd have, well, that's it. I mean, they'd still be permitted, but, so they could go out and buy another piece of property and develop it, but they'd have to meet best management.
But that's good, right? Meeting best management,
Well,
that's a good
think
thing.
so.
Isn't that the minimum standard? Doesn't everybody have to meet best management practices?
Don't they have to do that anyway?
Yeah.
Well,
It seems like the minimum bar, it's the lowest bar to hit.
Yeah, the difference, I think, though, is this is actually in the land use ordinance as opposed to getting a permit to do something and being imposed as best management practices. This is a condition of the zoning when you do it this way.
yeah, it has things that they must do in order to meet best management.
No, from where I sit, and they are not able to expand at this point in time, but if they want to, he buys another property, he can apply for a variance, but he has to meet best management, which in my viewpoint, everybody should do that anyhow, so that's a good thing. I cannot see a downside.
You're really departing from what this says. It would be a permitted use under this proposal, and nobody's agreed to that. If it's permitted use, he would just acquire the land.
Wouldn't have to come.
He'd come before here. If it's permitted use, there's nothing we can do. He expands. One of the conditions is he needs best management practices. He wouldn't need a use permit or use variance. So, I mean, you have to understand what's going on here. I can speak for council. Gary, you asked me. I wouldn't act on this coming before council. I would act. I know what the objectives are. If this were done properly, with revision to the master plan and the reasons were laid out and they made sense, that would be a hard thing not to go along with. If this came up helter-skelter like this, I would have reservations.
I guess Mr. Price speaks for the entire council.
No, I speak for me, and I'm a vote, and you can speak.
No,
your
and I
opinion,
thought
so-
months ago, we already had established that we want to do it by going through the reevaluation of the master plan.
Well, we're gonna do that anyway.
Mayor, you have a different
Right, but
idea?
there's a lot of talk of not yet, we can't start it yet, we can't do this, we can't do that, as opposed to, in one hand, you're saying we can't do it, and on the other hand, we're saying we need to do it through the reevaluation of the master plan, and the grant money's there, all we have to do is do it. But we can't do it yet, we shouldn't be talking about this yet.
That process,
We want to
that
do it.
process has begun. What I think the advice is that we shouldn't do this piecemeal, but we should incorporate this as part of our reexamination of the master plan. It's being funded by Highlands.
But
And if
that's
you're saying-
happening now.
And if you're saying it has started, how has it started?
Well,
We're in a,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, George.
Well, one of the things that, the first thing we have to do is, the Highlands has a grant to update, basically the land, go through and redo the land use classifications and bring all those up to date. And that's what we're doing right now. We're doing that to get all the mapping current, so that they have the mapping in place as to what's going on in the town and what has changed since the last time we were here. We're in the process of doing that. That should be completed probably within the next 2-3 weeks. And then from there, we can start moving into looking at the land use ordinance and the center designation. But we wanted to get the mapping finished, and quite frankly, we haven't finished it. It's still going to take a little time to pull it together.
Now, I imagine since funding is granted to us for this process, that it's mostly done by the paid professionals.
Well, no, well, with interaction with the board, don't get it wrong. I mean, we will prepare the various studies that are required to go ahead, subject to your review, tweaking, approval. It's not something that's done in a vacuum. I mean, the answer is, yeah, we'll probably pull together the initial information, present it to the board, and then essentially the board's job is to look at it and say, well, it's okay or it isn't. Look harder at this way to do that type of thing. We'll then present that material to you for review. And then the actual ordinance process still has to go up to council. and they have to review the ordinance portions of it and actually adopt them if they so choose.
Would that be presented to council by sections or as one whole giant, here's all the changes?
If I have anything to do with it, they're gonna come in as a unified package, so that we don't have to repeat the process 4 or 5 times. It may be broken into 2 sections, maybe I haven't thought about this, maybe there'll be the center, our center designation regulations and land use might come up in 2 parts. But they're interrelated, so it's virtually the same package.
We still have a housing component of highland submissions that we have.
Yeah, well, that's always been hanging around out here. We still have a component that we haven't even started, and that is as part of plan conformance, you're supposed to have an approved COA plan or affordable housing. And obviously that's up in the air, and that is nowhere closer to being done than it was 2 or 3 years ago. Until the courts make some decisions, we can't finish that.
Is that going to be an element of our master plan evaluation?
It can be a separate element. It can be totally separate from the center designation and that. But we have to keep in mind you'd like to have in your mind what the regulations are while you develop it, so you know where you're headed.
It may affect other zoning areas in the township.
Yeah, it might affect.
I mean, we have several components working here where one is affecting the other. We don't want to charge ahead and reevaluate the master plan, and then all of a sudden we've been working on this for 14 years.
That's going to hold up everything.
Well, the state does not move real quick in a lot of instances, but you try to conform with what they're requesting you, so you don't get a black eye with someone coming in or going through a court case and say, well, now you got to build 1,500 homes where your golf course was going to be. It's a tough situation. You just don't have the answers to come in right away and get these things. I'd love to have a number that we could consider what the number would be for COA obligation, as opposed to the state coming in and saying, Lopatcong, you're responsible for 550 affordable housing units. You will pay for them. Taxpayers won't be real happy.
We can segregate the housing part of this. Perhaps it would help, George, if we could get some idea of the timeline from now until the board would see or maybe you can explain in greater detail the process of how we get to the master plan revision that we can ultimately pass on to the governing body.
Yeah, what I'll do for the next meeting, I don't have it here today. We'll put together an outline of where we are in the process, what has to be done, and we can put a timeline to it, so that everybody knows where we are.
How long does it typically take? Is it 6 months? Is it a year?
Well, a lot of it, some of the delay in this over the years has been that supposedly the Highlands Council is developing prototypes of regulations that they wanted you to use as a base. Doesn't mean you had to adopt them exactly as they drafted them, but they wanted you to use these as an outline and then modify them as you see fit. Well, a lot of that stuff hasn't come together, even such things as clustering, which is one of the things that they'd like towns to do more of. At least the last time I talked to them, which is 2-3 months on this subject, they still hadn't got their clustering ordinance together in terms of what they were going to recommend. And so a lot of this stuff has been churning water, waiting for them to get some of their things done so that we didn't spin our wheels and try to reinvent a wheel that they already did. So there's been some delay in that sense. And also just getting the material out and getting it all assembled. We had concentrated on getting this land use thing to them, build out analysis to them, as one of the things we want to finish first to get that out of the way. So we concentrated on that. But I'll bring up to the board a list of the projects that we have in line. and a rough idea of how long it'll take to do it. See how fast we want to move. There is no due date in the sense of Highlands out of the schedule.
That was my question to George. With the time, what we're discussing tonight, is there any way you can come up with a timeline on when this would fit into the reevaluation of our master plan?
Yeah, I can
At
come
what
up with a
point?
timeline in terms of when we will be discussing stuff in front of the board, to go through that process. Once it comes up to the board and goes through review here and revisions and up to the council, I mean, I can't predict that, but I can tell you when we present it. Hopefully.
Do we have a budget, George?
I'm sorry,
A
what?
budget?
I do have budget items, yes.
No, I mean for the grant.
Yes, we do.
What are we talking about?
Oh, I'd have to I'll get you the number.
Yes, I'd like to know if it's $5,000 or
No, it's considerably more than 5,000.
$500.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, the other thing, I touched on something you mentioned about an outline and so on. I think it's good if you have the discussion first before you commit things to a draft. I think that would save a lot of wheel spinning and it would invite, good input along the way, and you'd see whether there was a consensus on something before we incorporated it.
That'd be fine. I don't have a problem with that. If I understand correctly, then I'll come up and just do a little verbal presentation of the schedule, the monies, that kind of thing, and then the board can get a feel for it.
Yeah, I don't know how everybody else feels. That would be my suggestion. I think that's the smoothest way.
Now, if I may, I would like to confirm with Joe, because that happened now for the last 3 or 4 times. We wanted to move ahead, and then Joe voiced his concerns, and we all nodded, and then we walked away, and nothing really happened. If George comes up with a timeline, and from what you said, that you would like to have it done the right way, is that for you sufficient to have it done the right way? And what do we have to do? Is that sufficient
Well,
for you?
you don't show up with an ordinance that changes the master plan and changes the previous ordinance with no study, no backup, no reason. And that's why the master plan is done here and ordinances are developed consistent with the master plan. So that's what I'm saying. Now, George is talking about the master plan. Now, I've seen some planners come in and they give you a draft and everybody reads it. They start tearing it apart and go up, down, and sideways with it. What I'm suggesting is just what George said. He gives an outline, give you some of the things you want to consider, and then he gets some policy decisions to incorporate into his planning. Is that fair, George?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe an outline of where we're going to go.
But isn't that what we've been doing here for months?
I think.
I mean.
No, I don't think so. I mean, nobody voted on this, with that the concrete gets one thing and the asphalt gets another, and the ordinance reads this, and that's not the charge of the planning board.
Yeah, I would think we voted on an ordinance and not part within it.
I don't know, show me a vote.
Well, I don't think,
This
I
is
don't
not
know if there was a
intended to be
vote.
voted on. This is a
This is
discussion I thought
discussion.
directed toward the areas of the industrial district that you thought needed consideration and change. It's really just an outline of the ideas about how.
And that's where we are. I'm saying that, it was a step. I think it's time to get going with the real plan.
I have no problem with that.
Is the.
We've been going with the real
their
plan for
revision
months.
to their master plan?
Right?
So how would we change it, Tom?
What?
Explain what we did.
What?
Explain to me what we did. Eric came in with an ordinance, says we want to do this. They've been working on an ordinance. I don't see any master plan here.
Well, there's no master plan yet, because
No, and
the
what's-
people here
what's
do not
charged?
know in what order this is supposed to go. It seems to be changing all the time. It's very ephemeral. It's not tangible.
So.
I just want to make sure that we now have the steps which we need to take to actually move forward, and that Joe is satisfied as a member of the planning board that the steps we're taking now are the right steps, and we have everything in place to, I feel like we're doing this for the last, 3 months, 4 months?
Something like that, maybe longer. And it doesn't seem to progress. It seems to get lost in a vapor. And you know, we always say, well, we have to do this, but we can't do it yet because we have to wait for the Highlands. Oh, but we really can't do that yet because it has to wait for the state. And oh, you know how it is, and we don't want to get sued. And the judge says that the asphalt plants are the same as concrete plants. And that's what I'm just, the thoughts that are going around in my head. But how do you bring this to
How do you bring this without the answers you're supposed to get? That we have up with, the Highlands is promulgating a new master plan, which we have to conform to. They don't have it yet. How do we conform to something that doesn't exist yet?
Okay.
So essentially, then what you say is that we cannot do anything to alter the zoning in the township until such time as the Highlands gives us a format for the master plan.
Well,
So then we are just we're just, well, I'm just saying, is that what you're saying? I'm trying to get clarity.
we're looking at, revise the master plan, review the master plan. They're offering to pay for it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's got to be in conformance to their master plan, their overlay of the master plan for Lopatcong Township. Now,
But they have
we
not
don't know
given us that?
what that is. How do we conform our master plan to their overlay?
So then the short answer is that we can do nothing on these matters until such time as the Highlands Commission gives us their overlay for the master plan. So why are we going to attempt to put out a timeline, since we are against a brick wall, apparently?
George,
Does
does the Highlands have a timeline for their master plan?
I'm gonna have, I haven't talked to them about that in quite a while. I'll have to call and see where they are in it. Part of coming back to the board is I will contact them and find out where they are on these various elements. See what they have. I think what we're all saying is that we can go ahead and amend the township zoning ordinance right now if we wanted to, but we'd have to amend our master plan. This is the planning area. We'd have to amend our master plan, draw up a draft of this ordinance, and go through the process of forwarding it to council, having them do their first reading, second reading, their review, that type of thing. We could do that, but what I guess I'm saying is that's on the town. Whatever it costs to do that process will be on the town.
And it might have to be redone
Well,
once
it
the
might-
Highlands comes out with theirs.
I don't know how we get back to this every time. We've already established, I thought, that we are going to do it by doing the master plan.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. That's the only
But
reason I'm.
you have to realize that all this, no matter what we do, has to be submitted to the Highlands to be approved.
Right.
That's
No
understood.
matter
That's
what
the
they
proper
do.
procedure,
But
right?
George, they're not writing a master plan for us. They're writing certain things we have to adopt as part of the
Well, it
master
gets
plan.
all packaged together. You're absolutely right. They have some of the outline verbiage, all the stuff, and what we are doing is editing, modifying, and trying to make it fit better the town rather than a general package they have. Assembling that all and bringing it up here for your consideration. That's what we do.
Have they suspended all grant money until they issue their go-by draft master plan?
No. As far as
So
I
we
know,
can
no.
move forward
Well,
with
that's what
what
he
they,
should confirm with the Highlands, that, hey, this money that you put forth, for this grant, we start moving and going forward, and getting your feedback as we move forward.
Right, because we can't do a
Waste
timeline
the money.
the way it
But they
is.
don't reimburse you
Well, that's
until
the thing.
everything is complete.
Right.
And they're the ones that deem it
So
complete.
we have to spend the money up front.
Can I?
If we want to move forward, why don't we just take a vote on what you want to send up to council?
Can I just ask, we always talk about, sorry, Gary, but we talk about the money spent. How much money are we talking about? Anybody know?
For review of the master plan.
Yeah.
Everything you're talking about here.
I'd have to go look at
Sorry,
the budgets, but I mean, you're talking 20,000 plus.
Okay.
So we previously established that we can move forward, and we have moved forward, but I heard we're already in the process of moving forward.
Well, I would
So-
hope that the material you have here sets you on a discussion of how you want to think about your industrial district, in terms of changes and modifications that can be incorporated into the Highlands, into our revisions of the master plan and the center designation. I mean, the material that's in here can begin to focus you on what some of the issues are in the industrial district and how you might want to handle them. Whether we do an ordinance now or 3 months from now. I mean, the point is it should help you think about the types of uses or how you want to structure the uses that will be permitted in the industrial district.
Does anybody have a current copy of the master plan that you've been reviewing?
I've
So
printed
maybe
the,
that's a,
I've printed the ordinance, and I've looked at it. And
we should send that out to everybody so that they can start to take a look at it.
Maybe I can jump in here. I think what everyone, what some of us are saying is that we can deal with this in a piecemeal fashion. There's nothing illegal about that. There's nothing improper about it. But if we're going to do that, we need to amend that portion of the master plan that addresses this to make it consistent. We have to pay for it out of taxpayer dollars. And it may not get council support, and it may be more difficult to defend. Those are the downsides to going that route. Positive side is you may get an ordinance that's defensible, and you have insurance that uses that you may not want to see expand or come to fruition. That doesn't happen. So those are the pros and cons.
Well, and another con is that when we eventually do go through the master plan reevaluation, it's subject to review and change again.
Correct.
So I don't think there's a board majority to move forward with that plan. By taking a soft count without show of hands, I just don't think it's there to go forward separate.
Recognize that you don't start with the ordinance. You have an objective, and I heard everybody's objective. I don't want another asphalt plant. I understand that. Your charge here is the master plan. And then the council, will come from the planner, come from here. They'll adopt an ordinance that is consistent with the master plan.
George can give you a timeline and budget numbers next month, but in fairness to George and everyone, we need some direction from the board. Do you want to pursue this piecemeal or as part of the bigger reexamination of the entire master plan, or I'll just say the planning element that's admittedly going to take more time?
I think we need to hear what's going on at the Highlands first. Yeah, honest with you.
That's where
Fair-
the answers have to
fair
come
point.
from.
Well, we can do this as part of the Highlands reevaluation of the master plan and start now. That's what we said before.
No, we don't have the format, so we can't
We don't
start.
need the format.
Right.
We were told earlier we could start now.
Well, I
So I
just
just
was,
want to get that.
I was just told we couldn't do it because we don't know the format that they want us to
Well,
do.
that was one of the arguments brought forward, but the Highlands have not suspended all review. If we got our work done and submitted it under the old plan, and they said, oh, but we're still, now 9 months later, we're still trying to come up with a new format for you. It's submitted. Review it under what you have in place.
But
How long are we
then
gonna
you
wait
lose
for
the
that?
grant money, I believe.
I don't know. I haven't read the grant. I have a hard time thinking they.
The point is, they don't have to act on it.
They tell you to sit on your hands for a year.
If you submit it to them and they know that the master plan is being developed, and whether they have the town line
Well, we're
board or
halfway through
not,
doing our work, and they finally submit it and say, okay, good, here's a little tweak, we need to, here's everything on the old master plan. Oh, they've come out with a new format, let's take all that information and piece it
But
into
you
the
know,
new format.
you keep,
Very good.
everybody keeps guessing. Why
Yeah,
don't you
that's
just
what I'm
let George go to
Yeah,
the Highlands,
I
get
think-
your answers, and
I
then
think
come
there's a
back
way.
and have something substantial to speak about.
George will figure it out.
Hey, George, I can give you a memo for the next meeting and give you 2 alternatives. We can tell you path number 1, which is looking at a master plan reexamination for the ROM district and what's involved with that, including cost. As you've been mentioned several times, you're going to pay for that on your own.
I don't think I need that.
Now, I recognize you may not have money to do that.
The second is actually waiting a little bit. It's not like it's close to do it as part of the approved petition that we have with the Highlands Council, and there's a whole series of planning tasks in that petition that have been approved with dollar amounts. And then under that scenario, you're looking at the whole town, including the R1 district as part of that, and that will be funded.
Right.
So that's the other alternative. So you have two choices here.
And 20 minutes ago, George said that he would put something in writing that followed that second
I was
option.
gonna say, just
Just a draft outline, a
I'll
short
confirm
thing.
with the Highlands where they are on their process. And I'll do a memo or verbally deliver it to you at the next meeting, a schedule for where they are and where we think we are and how we can go in that forward.
Well,
I'll bring along the budget numbers that we have.
and I like the written aspect instead of verbal.
Okay.
Joe said verbal would be fine. Peter also said he'd prefer something in writing. So I prefer something in writing. I think it's more,
I have no
it's more
problem with that.
definitive
I have
in
no
a step forward.
And you know what was,
Right, then you know, then you actually have something to look at and compare and make comment on.
No problem.
A quick question for George. I was looking at the list of permitted uses that goes through here.
Yes.
Then we get to, I don't know, it's 4 or whatever, SIC for the concrete products except block and brick.
Yes.
And I noticed that asphalt is not listed, just concrete products. But my follow-up question is, I know that the courts have already said that they're the same product.
We have the two definitions for the type of operation that's being proposed for the asphalt and for the concrete. The SIC codes make a distinction between the two in terms of the business activity that takes place.
So should we not be listing the SIC code for the asphalt?
It is in there. There's a definition of the asphalt plant in there under the SIC code. Eric, I think it was more of a sample.
Okay, no, I thought it was a full list here.
No, he's got the full list down there. It's about 3 inches thick.
Well, no, it's also in your, we do have the asphalt thing mentioned in here, but I have the actual full list of all the codes. But there is for the sake of describing the manufacturing process, there are 2 SIC codes, one for the concrete manufacturer and one for the asphalt company. There are 2 separate code numbers for that.
Right, then that was what I meant. Maybe as we move forward, we're going to list them both.
Well,
I just
they
want to,
are. At least in our ordinance, they're proposed to both be listed.
just for the record, there are probably plenty more than asphalt and concrete, and we're not just picking out like 2, right? Just want to make sure that it's not picking out just 2, there are more than that, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
just didn't see the number.
I'm just saying,
And I guess another question, just to be sure. So the best management practice that we're talking about, that's going to be in there regardless. The fact that we're going to make our master plans conformance to the Highlands Act. The Highlands Act says you have to do best management practice.
Well,
So we're not being any tighter than what we would have to do anyway to have our agreement with the Highlands, right?
yeah, what we will do is the master plan will discuss best management practices, which will then be turned into part of our land use regulations and attached to the land development regulations of the town.
And we have to do that anyway.
Requirement for them to use it.
Yeah, we have to do that anyway for the Highlands Act.
Yes, if you wish to be consistent, yeah.
Yeah, so we have to do that.
So I think we're going to proceed with George. You'll
Yeah.
give us a list and the estimated costs and be ready for the next,
Next meeting, that's fine.
Okay. we have an agreement on that we'll proceed that way?
And what do you mean by list of costs? The 2 different options?
You're going to provide the 2 options for the,
Did you get
For the
for
Highlands,
the Highlands.
right, and my understanding is the board would like to proceed using the Highlands funds.
Mhm.
I just want to,
What I'm gonna bring back to the board is the process using their grant.
Okay,
I make it easy, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion that we proceed under the Highlands program using the Highlands money.
okay. Have a motion?
Well, wait a minute, that's not particularly,
Understandable to me. I was just told that the Highlands does not give you money until you submit your work product, so that means we can't proceed.
Well, that's a problem for me, not for the town. The money's there.
It's cash
The
flow.
real question is how much do I want to fund in order to get this work done? Because it's my dime that it's gonna ride on until it's finished, approved, and eventually said, it's high cost to the town.
So you're saying you don't expect the township to pay you as you go along out of regular township monies?
You can say that, or
What?
That's not a requirement.
This grant should have been recorded by the CFO when we got a petition several years ago.
I don't know if it has been.
Recording.
Yeah, I know, it should be, yeah.
George has been working for years on this.
Yeah, and the
We've been
Highlands,
reimbursed by the Highlands.
and the
over the
Highlands
years.
did reimburse. and it
Yes,
took
they
us-
have.
Took us about a year and a half to get paid after the work was done. The answer is they did pay.
George, they didn't pay at 100% completion, it just,
No, they paid it 100% completion. After the town took action on it, it was properly adopted.
on a phase or on the whole plan?
No, on the section of the grant that we.
On the section.
Right.
Yeah, so if there's 8 sections, as we complete one,
You get paid.
you would get paid.
That's right.
There's a whole series
Yeah.
of planning tasks in the petition. There's little
Yeah.
bitty bitty ones that are $500 to $1,000, and then there's other ones that are $15,000, $20,000. Once you complete each one of these tasks, you're eligible to
Yes,
go in.
so you don't have to wait till the whole master
Correct.
plan.
No.
Thought about all of them. Well, I have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second? I'll second it. Roll call, Beth, please.
Can we be clear what it is again?
You stated.
2 options, maybe I can, as I made the motion. I don't want to proceed piecemeal using our own dollars. I want to do this as part of the Highlands program under the grant. And that's my motion.
Is there a time frame ascribed
I
to
don't
this?
think we're prepared to vote on that
Yeah.
until George comes back with what the
Yeah.
Highlands plan, what the status of that plan is right now.
Oh, we can defer it. I mean, I'm just trying to, we're going to have to pick one direction or the other.
I think you're voting blind, though. You don't have enough information.
We have no budget to do the other.
Well, we have
So-
to establish
so
a
you can
budget,
wait.
so.
The next meeting, we can.
Well, we don't have a firm budget yet in the council, so we can,
Yeah, let's just wait till George gets
we
back.
can put the money into the
All
budget.
right, I'll withdraw the motion.
Waste of time.
You withdraw your motion?
I'll withdraw the motion.
I'll withdraw the second.
How about a motion to adjourn?
We still have some other business.
Oh, we do? Come on.
Any more comments on this subject? If not, I'll open it to public comment. Anyone? Yes, sir. Would you come forward and identify yourself, please?
Beth, does that need to be plugged in for now?
No,
Okay.
no, I can hear you.
Okay.
Very good.
Robert Forniatis, attorney for 189 Stryker Road Associates. I love watching the legislative process, by the way. This was great. Very, very invigorating. Just 2 questions for Mr. Witter. Was there any finding made that with an asphalt fabricating plant is less harmful to the environment than a regular asphalt plant?
Well, I think it's a good question. It's in the sense of what do you mean by asphalt?
Well, asphalt plant is the process, make aggregates, put them in trucks, and then they go wherever they go to build roads and things like that.
As compared to the manufacture of the asphalt.
Now, the asphalt fabrication that you're saying would be permitted in this new zoning ordinance, not concrete. You talk about asphalt fabricated products. I think that's what I heard. you say.
Yes, you can make an asphalt pavement.
Okay. Are there any companies in New Jersey that do that? That make asphalt pavers?
Easton's blocks is good. I'd have to check. again, but
I've
Easton-
never concrete fabricators. I've never heard of it.
There are ones that make pavers out of asphalt. Besides road.
Right, what else, what other asphalt fabricated products are there?
Well, that's the ones I'm familiar with.
Just
That's the
curious.
landscape architect. There may be other products, but that's what I.
You know, like sidewalks and culverts and things like that.
People make asphalt sidewalks and asphalt curbs, but that's part of extruding the same asphalt. I'll defer to Paul, but that's the same asphalt that you put on the road. It's just extruded.
I've just never seen an asphalt brought out in sections. That's the only reason I'm asking.
Well, these are products. They're stacked just like bricks. They're delivered to the site and laid. Or the asphalt pavers.
Pavers, right, I'm talking about sidewalks, driveways, roads.
They're usually, in my experience has been, they're laid out just like an asphalt road. They're laid out in a roll.
Right, not yet, mine too. You mentioned before
that this zoning ordinance as written would permit the use that 189 Strikers got approved and was sustained by the court. But what they got approved was the type of plan I'm talking about, not the type of plan the ordinance is talking about. So it wasn't, unless I'm missing something. You said this ordinance wouldn't have an effect on the asphalt plant that was approved.
I believe the definition we picked would allow just the activities that they're interested in doing on that site. That's right.
Which is manufacturing asphalt, putting trucks and letting it go out to be.
Yeah, that's right.
Build roads.
Build roads, sidewalk, whatever.
I didn't read it that way. I guess I'll take it. That's all I have. I did have one question. You did say something about if there was a use that's there now that becomes a non-conforming use if this ordinance gets adopted, so some uses might be affected.
Yes.
And if they go to expand, they have to be expansion of a non-conforming use, and you need a use variance. Does that also apply if it burns to the ground and you have to rebuild it?
I'm sorry.
If you have a pre-existing non-conforming use because the ordinance changed,
Yeah.
and the building burns to the ground, and the person wants to rebuild that with the insurance proceeds he just got, isn't that also a use variance?
There are sections in the code that deal with how much destruction.
Let's just completely destroyed, burnt to the ground.
Well, normally if it was totally gone, that there'd be no foundations, no nothing.
They'd have to come in for a use-
At least my experience would be that would be considered as starting over, and it would be a.
So he'd have to come in and get a use variance to build the use that was there before the fire.
If it's totally destroyed, but if there's a foundation, you can rebuild with a foundation, that kind of thing. There's a lot of leeway.
I don't know, Mr. Spazaro, is that correct? There's a foundation, build it, that come in.
Usually in terms of total destruction, and in today's world, the way things are built, total destruction, it's not very likely unless some plane came through and leveled the place, and then theoretically.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else? Excuse me. Seeing none, we'll adjourn the public portion. A motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So adjourned.